Returned. I was kind of like, I feeling myself move to the end of the road in terms of, I saw a cliff coming at graduation 4 months after the semester in Ottawa. This would have been spring 2013. And I'd started to get to know a girl, really liked her. We had great connection, but it just wouldn't start. And in a nutshell, university ended. I went back home to the job I really had outgrown in terms of interest and intellect and whatever. I was a field tech in the oil patch doing many different things, but out on the landscape in the weather every day, working on wells or pipelines. After install, I was a maintenance and data acquisition guy, not a construction guy. So it wasn't as intense as the oil patch can be, and I was home every night. So lots of good about it. But anyway, went back home after graduating to a job I didn't like, with a relationship that was like maybe germinating, hard to say. And that uncertainty, but in mutual interest, carried on for the duration of the summer. She stayed here in Vancouver area. I was home in rural Alberta, and culminated the end of that summer with a decision to give it a shot, followed 5 days later with a decision to definitely not give it a shot. And that was the breaking point, and that precipitated the breaking of, the way I describe it now is, it broke my relationship with woman, capital W. This is following on, 15, 20 years of not having any clue how to do this, but not being able to look away. I can't stop pursuing a relationship, and I don't know what the heck I'm doing. My dad and I didn't, our relationship did not fare well in the wake of that. He didn't like seeing me hurt. He saw, from his vantage point, the foolishness on my part that was there, and moved in to correct me, which I did not receive well. And so for 3 years, I lived at home post university. I was 28 when I graduated. For a good 2 years, we were not in conflict.
Mm.
And I mean, the gist of the conflict was, I want you to just hear me out. Don't tell me what I'm doing wrong. You don't understand where I'm at. Let's start there. And that was very hard for him to do. And it was very hard for me to have, I felt abandoned by his response to the predicament and the emotional space that I was in.
Mm.
And I think, I think he was hurting a lot watching me hurt, and
Yeah.
just wasn't able to handle that, and needed to fix that,
Yeah.
for for me for sure, but also for himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that was the second relationship that broke, was relationship with father. Work was rough, just because I was done with it, and I had no idea what to do. I'd done outdoor ed, I'd done photography, I'd done communications, I'd done a stint in politics, and it just, none of it was leading to a place to stay.
Yep.
So relationship with work broke. Relationship with God broke, in that I was like, I don't know what to expect from you. I can't trust that following you produces anything good, or anything that I want. It's not that it doesn't do anything good. It's just, no matter how sensible and good I believe that you are, I can't make that, the heights of that, touch ground in my life as I interpret it and live it day to day. So it was just like, I don't know what to do with you. You don't have to leave, but I don't know what to do with you.
Mhm.
And I don't particularly want to, well, I don't want to let you do with me as you will, because I don't trust that you're going to send me in a direction that I'm game to go. And I don't even know how to let you do that anyway. So there was the language that I'd grown up with had an error in it, or just a blind spot. It's like, let go and let God. Well, how do you do that? And I mean, I need the finer grained on the ground details, because I need some instruction here. The principles aren't connecting, and I don't know how to wield these principles. And then the last relationship that broke was the relationship with myself, or maybe that was the relationship that was beneath all these others. And I mean, I'd been very hard on myself for a very long time. It was a habit of thinking. Wasn't healthy, wasn't good. Uh, so that was August 5th or 6th, 2013. And I was away on a contract I was just about to start. I got driven up the day before and then got the message from this girl. I was 6 hours from home. I got the message at 1 a.m., didn't sleep, total wreck. Like it was a break. And I called my boss. I was like, who was involved enough. It was a small company. There were like 10 guys. He was involved enough to know that I had some relational stuff going on that was high stakes for me. And anyway, he understood. He's like, come back. We'll send another guy. And he worked it out. He called the field operator that I was supposed to coordinate with. And the story I was told was, he says, my guy had something happen. He's not going to be able to come in today. We're going to send another guy up, and we'll start the contract in two days from now. And all the field operator says was, damn women. Like, yep.
Well, an industry that mostly employs men between the ages of 20 and 40.
Yeah. So that's when the break started, and it took a good 2.5 years.
Mm.
But that all got put back together and I participated for sure, but it was, I don't know. I don't even, God did it is way too simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a really wonderful journey since. And
Well, how did God do it?
so I went to university, but I almost went to a woodworking school. And there's this little woodworking school up here on the Sunshine Coast. It's like an island, but it's part of the mainland. You just can't drive to it. You have to take a ferry. It's cut off by Howe Sound. And there was a little woodworking school that I'd found out about in 2009, and they taught fine woodworking in the classical sense. It was expressly not career training. It's called the Inside Passage School of Fine Cabinet Making, and the pandemic did them in. So they're not operating anymore, but if people are interested, the website is still up and the work is there. My teacher was a student of James Krenov, who started the program at the College of the Redwoods in Fort Bragg. And Krenov is an influential woodworker in American woodworking culture, as he's an author and started the school. So there's a whole subset of fine woodworkers and hobby woodworkers called Krenovians, of which I am one now. I'd almost gone to that school instead of university, but my mom was like, maybe get a degree. And my dad was like, get the degree. So I got the degree, didn't get the job, paid off my student loans from university working in the patch, and I had no idea what to do. I was like, I'm either going to do Labrie or the fine woodworking program. I had a call with, I think I was looking at the British one. Uh, and then I was like, it's just, at the time, it was just more of the same. It would have been like I described with NT right in the beginning of university, trying to keep what I had come from and the priors that I had been operating out of. It would have been trying to recapitulate those and uh, you know bring them into the present and refound my life on it again. And I was just like, I don't want to try that. It's not that I don't think it's wrong. It's not that I do think it's wrong, or it was just like, I want to go to this woodworking school. So that's what I did. 2016, I left. I moved out. It helped. The oil price crashed December 2014, and that forced my hand, if you will. I went from working, 3 weeks out, 1 week back, to working half time within the course of a month.
Wow.
And that, I mean, I was okay with it in a sense. I would have been working too much. And it would have been hard for me to leave the money. And so when the money went away, I was like, then I guess I'll go do this thing. So I lived on the Sunshine Coast for 2 years. I went to the school for 9 months, and it was like the fourth week there of the 9 month program. And I was just like, I don't know what this is, but I love doing this.
Mm.
I just love it. And I'd had quite a difficult time as well making the decision to go, because that part of me that everybody has, that's your critic, uh, Ian McGilchrist's left brain, if you will, was like, this is stupid. We can't go here. We can't do this. This is very dumb. Like, well, what it was is, what's your plan? It's a very anxious voice. It's like, how is this going to work out? And I learned over the course of the post-university crash, uh, there was a man in our community, Martin, who was friends with my parents and the elder doctor in the community and he moved into psychiatry some years prior. And my parents called him and says, "Would you see Tim?" And so he said, "Yeah, send him over." And that was vital. I saw him every day for 2 weeks, and then for 2 years after that, as needed, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly. And when Jordan Peterson talks about Carl Rogers in his lectures on personality transformations, it that's what Martin was. He was that curative
Yep.
listener. So he didn't do anything. He just provided you the space where anything could be said. He provided the punching bag if you needed to lash out and just let someone have it without reacting, and then he taught me over a year in like consistent response. I would make a declarative statement about how things were, and he says, "You don't know that." You say, "This is what I'm afraid of." Just, tell the truth, basically.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
Very carefully and very clearly, do not allow yourself to sway. But unlike my father, he doesn't have skin in the game.
Right.
And so when I went to the woodworking school, I still had all of the turmoil, but I had been shown, modeled, worked through it numerous times how to respond to anxiety instead of just respond anxiously.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so that was the woodworking school was the environment where things really started to come back together.
Tell me a little bit more about what this school was like. Was it, I mean, I would imagine it's a lot of actually working with things. It's not sitting and listening.
No, 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 no.
It's you're doing.
Yes, for sure. Uh,
And it's not necessarily complete, machines aren't forbidden,
yeah,
but it's a lot of hand.
definitely. So it's a small school. It would be probably a little over 1,000 square feet, uh, a rectangle, so 2 by 1, and then with a dividing wall in the middle, and the machine room at the back, and the bench room in the front. This little town called Roberts Creek, hardly a town, just like a town center with a post office and a library. And we were a 5 minute walk from the water. There's a pier there, and so like when something would go wrong at the bench and you cut the wrong side of the line or something, which happened a lot. It was just like you put your tools down, you take a deep breath, and you go for a walk to the pier. We call it. So I need to go take a walk to the pier. But so the woodworking school, it was my teacher was taught by James Krenov. James Krenov was taught by Carl Malmsten, a designer out of Sweden. So I'm in that tradition. And Krenov's first book and maybe most influential book is called The Impractical Cabinet Maker. And so my teacher, riffing off of that, called the program, the 9 month program, or it's a year program. I did 9 months of it. It was called the Impractical Cabinet Maker program. And the first term was called Impractical Studies. So there was no mistaking what you were signing up for. This is not practical. And I'm coming from rural Alberta, immigrant dad, farming mom, both of them teachers. Uh, we do things that are practical. They have to be practical. And so I'm in this being like, we have a problem. I want to be here. I love this. It's expressly impractical. And so the first week you spend making your own tools. So the first day or two, you start with rough iron, not rough, like rough shaped irons, and you have to set them up, which is you hone the back and you hone the face. You lap the back, you learn how to sharpen. So the first day of woodworking school, you're working with steel, and like nobody has ever done this before. Whether you've come from a carpenter background or tech college as a cabinet maker, like this is not what people are taught in the market anymore.
Yeah.
And from there, you lap your irons, you hone them up, you get like you showed us how to do it in 2 hours. You're shaving the hair off your arms, you get it razor sharp,
Wow.
and and then you make your own planes, and you make 3 planes, and those are the planes you're going to use for the rest of the term. You can make more, at your leisure thereafter, but you go through that process, and then you get into the wood. And I don't know, Paul, if you know much about woodworking or if you've ever worked with a hand plane, but
Little bit.
maybe you remember or have seen the quality of surface that comes from a sheared cut instead of an abraded cut. And like I was good with my hands and good with woodworking. I loved shop class in high school. We built a boat in grade 12. I knew what woodworking was, so I thought. And what I was introduced to at this school was just dazzling.
Hmm.
Like you sand a surface, it looks good, feels good. You plane that surface with a finely set iron and take shavings that like hang in the air like a feather.
Hmm.
Uh, and like the light and it's the light. Wood is so full of light, so responsive to light, but we mute that when we sand it. And do you know the concept wabi sabi, Japanese imperfect perfection? It's it was a sensibility of the school where you're not trying to make things perfect. We call them fingerprints. So if you run your hands across a curved surface, it's not a perfect radius or a perfect arc. you feel the little facets from every passage of the plane, or you leave that there. You let it be part of the story. So that was the kind of place. Yes, your sense of it is correct, where machines are a means of working, of getting you close, but all the fit and the finish, all the joinery is done by hand, and it's done slowly. And I don't think they named the school the Inside Passage intentionally to refer to what was going on inside their students. The Inside Passage is a naval, you're aware, up here. It's a geographical thing, but very much so. The students who were there were either retired or late 20s, early 30s. There was one guy who came out of high school and he didn't quite fit.
Well,
And every
that's a nice mix because late 20s, early 30s, developmentally, like you've probably already learned some failure. And
Exactly.
so you're beginning to open up to some bigger, more difficult things. And retired people have probably known a lot of failure and can teach from it. So it sounds really like just an ideal situation.
And also, like, we had a retired guy who's a lawyer, very successful, but the success
Right.
was not satisfying, if you will.
Yeah.
It didn't have what it didn't have this other dimension that the school was soaked in and trying to manifest. So the first thing that happened at the school for me was I was really battling with this part of me that was saying, you should not be here. This is a waste of time. What are we going to do with this? How is it going to work out? And I was able to say to it at some point early on, like, do you have any better ideas? Like, we've worked oil and gas for 4 years. How did you like that? We made the money. Here, like, we're still miserable. And I was like, do you have any better ideas? And it was as if he said, no. I was like, then could you just shut up? Like, we're on the same team. And if you don't have any ideas, like, can we just let this ride for 3 or 4 months? And I was able to bargain with myself in that way, and it worked out. Where he was like, "Okay, fine. You are enjoying this." As in, you're enjoying it. As I kind of am enjoying it. You know, that part of me still gets to make perfectly straight cuts and make the joints fit as well as I can. But heading into it as well, and this is where Jordan Peterson first appeared on my radar and was really helpful. I'd been I'd been trying to, like, Peugeot talks about how the postmodern trick is how you take a unity and you lower it down one level and you say, oh, that's just an amalgamation of these lower things. And I've been doing that all through, my from adolescence onward. It's what I did with photography. Oh, photography, they're just pretty pictures. But I didn't see what I was doing, and it was very effective at undermining the soul part of it. And so I went to this woodworking school and I'm going into it and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? You're paying all this money and all you're learning how to do, you're just learning how to make a box. It's just a box. That's all it is.
In China, they're making boxes like mad, and here you
Exactly.
are.
Yeah. And so the reason why, like, this is kind of going backwards a bit, we'll probably get there. Peugeot has been so wonderful for me to like find out about and tune into, because it's like he's speaking my language. It's I didn't know I was a pattern reader, or I didn't know that that's how I thought in patterns. I didn't know that that was how I made sense of the world. That's just how I did it. And then to find him and he's like codified it and articulated it, it's like, oh, yes. So I'm over on the Sunshine Coast. I'm there early on after arriving. I'm like, okay, I'm here. I'm learning how to make boxes. That's what I'm learning how to do. And then the thought occurs to me, well, what is a box anyway? And I was like, all right, so a box is to space what a word is to perception. And, you know, you see a forest, and you just see a forest. But then, oh, there's a tree. So the tree separates from the forest. And then, well, that's a cedar tree. That's a redwood. That's a walnut tree. What's that doing here? That doesn't belong here at all. That's interesting. Oh, boxwood. And like, but I had an experience. Part of my business is salvaging hardwood trees. I have to know what they are. And, because you can spend a lot of money on something that isn't what you thought it was.
That's a bad thing.
Yeah, which I didn't spend a lot, but I've gone down the wrong trail. And it occurred to me at one point that, oh, boxwood grows here, and it's a very useful wood. It's extremely hard. This is the hedgewood that topiary is made of. Um, I was like, I wonder if that grows here. I wonder if it grows to size. Maybe I could start collecting boxwood at high enough grade and scale to maybe make some money with it. So I started looking for it. There it was at the four-way stop like this huge boxwood tree at the four-way stop that I stopped at twice a day to and from work. And it like completely oblivious to it. Then I start looking for it, boom, you see it. And so that principle that Peugeot and Peterson and Vervaeke have all talked about, where you see what you are looking for, you perceive what you look for.
You have
Oh,
eyes to see. Now you
yes,
have eyes to see.
yes. And everybody else in that little town didn't see it at all.
Yep.
And so you have this awareness of yourself of being you're enchanted by things that everybody else just is, but it's normal or part of the landscape. Anyhow, that concept is that's the example of the words causing something to come into being. And I was like, well, what is a box? And as occurred, I thought a box can be the same thing in space that a word is in perception. And so here is where I live. Here is where I sleep. Here is where I work. And then in this place where I work, here is where the books go. Here's where the pens go. In that room, in that other room, that other box, that's where I cook. And then this is where the pans go in that box where I cook. And then this is where the cutlery goes. And inside that box where the cutlery goes, here's where the spoons go. And I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense. And then I was like, so the boxes that I'm learning how to make at this woodworking school are to language, are are to cabinet making what poetry is to language.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, I don't know what that means worked out, but I'm interested in what that could become if I follow that insight.
It's a shame. Well, I might have mentioned this in the estuary group up in Bellingham, but Karen Wong came to the Olympia event with she had been speaking to someone and oh gosh, I've got to really clip this because she said it so perfectly. It's basically once you get to the point of seeing that there's no bottom to
Mm-hmm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talking to one person, and that person, it was milk or
Oh, interesting.
paint
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
or hair. And because you just and people would say, what, milk or
Mm-hmm.
paint or hair? But you begin to realize that something that reality is not what we think it is. And
Yes.
it sounds like through the box, that was sort of your entry into another world that made sense of the world that you were living in before.
I flipped into a different mode. And yeah, look, what you described is exactly the case. And so my access, like the key that got me into this was the Genesis story. And God said, let there be, and it was. And it was at this, and so I'm working with that as my source code, if you will. And can I apply it to this program and will it run? And I was like, I think that runs. And then a buddy of mine posted on Facebook an interview that Peterson had done with the school newspaper. This is 2016, and things are starting like
Mm.
the rocket engines are starting to ignite.
Yeah.
And in that, so I grew up in Alberta. I'm a conservative guy. I tend to agree with what like Peterson is talking about and arguing against. I agree with his argument against what he's arguing against, and so I think it's just going to be a short little political polemic, and then like that's this part. But then this part underneath of it, he goes into the Genesis story, and he's talking about the words creating, and I'm like, wait, I've just been here, and what he's saying maps on to what I was playing with and trying out. And I was like, what else is he saying? And so it was just like I'm advancing over here and then I'm checking it against what he's saying. And these two are, the contexts are very different, but the concepts match or map onto one another. And that's how I got roped into this. Not roped in, that's how I got onto the trail. That was the first breadcrumb. Uh, so that was the first thing that happened at the school was there was a bridge built or yeah, the possible of reparation of the relationship with work. It's like, ah, I can see and I can articulate the spiritual import of this particular craft, and it doesn't just apply to me and my little particular idiosyncratic craft. This is a principle that, like you say, can apply to milk. And you say milk, that makes a lot of sense to me. Milk is a very deep realm for sure. But I was making a piece, a little cabinet for that hangs on the wall out of a wonderful piece of California Claro walnut. And my mom was visiting, and I was in the process of, we call it composing. So you take the board, you have your intention. I'm going to make a cabinet. I'm not going to make a chair, for instance. And you start into the wood, you open it up, and it was a nice thick 3-inch piece of walnut. So we resoldered on the bandsaw, open it up, and now you're looking at the grains. And that's where you stop. And you just spend, I mean, you get a coffee, you get your pencil out, and we call them negative templates. It's like a little window, and you lay it on the workpiece, and you're just looking for appealing, attractive, beautiful patterns in the grain to then start selecting pieces from. And it's one of the best parts of the process. Like the material is so beautiful. There's something about wood. I can't put it into words yet, but I'd like to. I was listening to, did you listen to, what's his name? Peugeot, the older brother.
Matthew?
Matthew. He just did an interview with his Spanish translator.
Oh yeah, I didn't listen to that one.
It's really good. In there, he talks about listening to the animals, like Adam names. So,
Yeah.
let them be, and there
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
I was doing that at the level, and he listens to the animals, and I'm like, oh, that's what and he calls it divining. That's what we were trained to do at the school with the grain. We come to it with an intention, but we say, what do you want to be? Do you want to be this tall or this tall? Should we make it this deep or this deep? Well, if we make it too shallow, we're going to miss this beautiful little change in color or reversal in grain here. Let's make it a little wider so we can capture that. There's a blemish here that most people would cut out, but if I put it on the door, on the front, on the face, I can actually use that. It can be used as the pull to open the door, which is the pattern of the stumbling stone that becomes the capstone. So all of that was forefronted at this school, that sensitivity and openness and approach to the wood, which is very much contra to the culture. It's contra to it's the right brain in McGilchrist's right brain approach.
Yep. Yep.
It's in the way Mathieu describes it. It's bringing the giving the feminine a place to belong, to have
Yep.
us listening to the feminine, and so the feminine says, "Hey, you listen to this. Did you see this?" I just it was so enjoyable. Um, so my mom was visiting when I was going through that very initial process, and then she went back home to Alberta, and we were on the phone a couple weeks later, and she's like, "How's the cabinet going?" And I was like, "I remember it was a rainy night in the suburbs here in Vancouver. I was on this side of the ferry for some reason, and I was telling her about this thought I'd had, and it was that we've been made in God's image, and we create as He creates. It's one of the marks of our image bearingness." And if I love creating like this, if it's so enjoyable to me to open up the piece of wood and say, "What do you want to be?" then is it not reasonable to think that he not only is deigned to work with us that way, but enjoys it? And she's like, "I think so." And I was crying. I was just like, that's not the God that I've been
Mm.
relating to my whole life.
Mm. Mm.
And that made all the difference, that little insight.
Yeah.
And so I describe that as the like when I grew up, people would talk about how you got to meditate on the names of God, and I just didn't know what to do with that. I'm grade six after all. Like, okay, uh, but it's the Emmanuel that has really that, that I've connected with,
Mm.
and so that pattern of "I'm with you," or like, "What do you want to be? I'm with you. Like, let's go together." That's my approach to the material,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and taking that pattern and laying it laying it over the higher order relationship of myself with the divine. It works because the divine has come down to be with us, and I mean that's where I've come to rest the last, say, 5 or 6 years.
Mm.
Is like, how's this going to work out? I don't know. Let's go find out.
Yeah.